Many of you, I'm sure, don't know that McCarthy was actually at the New York Stock Exchange. He said some very, very interesting thing that I think will affect every American throughout the world. Most notably, this debt ceiling, inflation, and your pocket money. Let's take a listen.
We are seeing in real time the effects of reckless government spending, record inflation, and the hardship that it causes. Rising interest rates, supply chain shortages, instability in the banking system, and uncertainty across the board. Now, unlike President Biden, I don't dismiss Americans' fear about higher prices. I share them. And I share their conviction that we must change course before it's too late. That is why I'm here. Today, I speak to you not just as Speaker of the House, but as a father, as a former small business owner, as a taxpayer, as a proud American. I want to talk to you about the debate that is not happening in Washington, but should be happening over our national debt. It's a debate that directly affects the lives of every single American.
So he has changed position. He was speaking, holding on to the podium for support, and now we have switched over to the most touchiest subject, which is the national debt. For those of you who do not know or have been living under a rock, the country is in real danger of defaulting. The last I heard, I thought the Treasury only had 6 weeks left of money in it. I think that was 2 to 3 weeks ago. I may be wrong on that. Maybe she found some more money underneath her pillow. I don't know. But things are slated to run out by the end of May, early June, as they keep sending money and things to Ukraine. Which is why, when you see him all of a sudden now bring his hands to each other and start holding themselves, as he goes into this debate subject, it is very stressful.
I met with President Biden at the White House on February 1st, 75 days ago. During our meeting, I told the president clearly, let's find a way to come to an agreement, like we have before. Had the president agreed to negotiate in good faith, we'd already be done. Unfortunately, I have not heard from the White House since our very first meeting. President Biden has been missing in action and misleading the public. Mr. President, with all due respect, enough is enough. This is not how the leader of the free world should act. Your partisan political games are provoking the very crisis you claim to avoid. Greater dependency on China, increasing inflation, and threatening Medicare and Social Security. Even members of his own party think this approach is extreme. Democrat Senator Joe Manchin recently said, recent actions make clear to me that the Biden administration is determined to pursue ideological agenda. Senator Manchin is right. Make no mistake, the longer President Biden waits to be sensible, to find an agreement, the more likely it becomes that this administration will bumble into the first default in our nation's history. Addressing the debt.
Now, in this part, he actually gives the audience eye contact, because as you have been seeing, he's been reading the teleprompters. And he is portraying, he has practiced the speech. So at this part, he's expecting a debt default, which is why he gives such good eye contact to the audience, because he's already set it up. We've been trying.
But since the president continues to hide, House Republicans will take action. Okay, so here's our plan. In the coming weeks, the House will vote on a bill to lift the debt ceiling into the next year. Save taxpayers trillions of dollars, make us less dependent upon China, curb our high inflation, all without touching Social Security and Medicare. Simply put, it puts it on a fiscal responsible path in 3 ways. It limits, it saves, and it grows. First, we'll limit federal spending.
So as you saw, because that pretty much is just the core of the speech, this is what they're going to do. They're going to pass this particular bill. And those of you who know what's going on, you know that this will never be signed by Biden and probably will never pass the Senate anyway. It is just going to be in the House. But there you go, you have the strategy laid out for you, because everything is strategy in Washington.
Always win. So thank you very much. And thank you for agreeing to take a handful of questions before we head down to the trading floor and check in on the markets as well. But you mentioned inflation as an important concern that U.S. policymakers have not yet fully addressed, yet alone remedied. And on the fiscal side, you made your and your party's case for curbing spending to alleviate a lot of the pain that
So we've got some twisting of the bottle. I always find it interesting when people start playing with things on certain topics. And obviously inflation is a very hot stress topic because he starts talking about it. McCarthy's over here playing with a bottle of water. He's also angled himself away from the guy. He's sitting very uncomfortably in that chair. It's a stress position.
individuals and businesses have been feeling because of increasing prices. Now that's fiscal policy. Now on the monetary side, the complete other side of the coin, you know, we have seen recent PPI prints and CPI prints show that inflation is moving in the right direction. The Fed has been cutting rates in an effort to, again, curb inflation.
All right, I see him, as he was talking about CPI, PPI, playing with his chair arm now. Now, for those of you who know, they keep changing these numbers in the background of how they figure them out so that it looks good. They're the most flattering that they could find. And as soon as the guy talks about, you know, they starting to look good, McCarthy stops playing with the chair. I guess the real number that they see is terrifying.
And to some degree slow.
Cutting rates or raising rates?
I'm sorry, raising rates. Raising rates to reduce inflation and to some degree curb economic growth as well. Do you feel the Fed is on the right track right now?
Well, first let me say the Fed is an independent entity.
Correct.
I quoted Milton Friedman, my favorite economist. He said inflation only starts when government spends too much. He also said the only way to curb inflation is the interest rates have to be higher than the inflation rate. So as an independent entity, had they acted earlier and gone to 3%, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in. But if we gone for a decade of cheap money, we also realize what we were doing. But if government continues to spend, they create the inflation to make Fed to have to act. My role as a policymaker, first and foremost, cut back that created inflation to begin with. That's the place that I serve. Curve back the wasteful spending. Think for a moment, you added $6 trillion. The Congressional Budget Office is the one who came out and said we'll pay $10.5 trillion just in interest. 83 years, we haven't paid that much. We're going to pay that in a 10-year window. If you look at a 50-year average of what we normally spend per GDP, it's around 21%, but we've been spending over 23 on our way to 25. If you look at revenues, a lot of people say, well, you should raise taxes. On average, we normally bring in about 17% of GDP in revenues. You know what we're bringing in today? 20. Only 200 times in modern history have you brought in 20. So it's not a revenue problem. We're bringing more money in a percentage than any time before, but we're spending and there's no curve on that. So the Fed's their own entity, they get to make their own decisions, but they're having to make decisions based upon what we did to create inflation. So I have a responsibility to curve that so the Fed wouldn't have to act. The one thing I would say about the Fed, focus on the things of why they were created, not things that they weren't.
Yeah. Fair.
Ooh, don't talk about the SJWs. We're trying not to get banned.
So, Mr. Speaker, obviously from today's gathering and from your remarks, business leaders are becoming increasingly focused on the debt ceiling. And it's not just talk, you're seeing it in the markets as well. And if we look at some financial instruments that are commonly used to insure against a government default, the prices of those instruments are increasing, and to some degree, the most commonly used instruments are at their highest levels in over a decade. So since the last time we really faced this, this challenge. In your party's negotiations, and to the extent you have visibility into the administration's plans, are you monitoring market conditions as you head into these negotiations?
Look, markets go up and down. Again, markets are reacting to work we've done, so I shouldn't monitor you. I should monitor what we're doing, and that's exactly what I do. The reason why the markets are going up, because the president's ignored us for 75 days. Look, I went to see the president on February 1st. I sat with him. This is a guy who is a former senator who voted 4 times to raise the debt limit when they put something attached to it. The only times he voted against the debt limit, he said when they didn't do something enough to change the behavior. In 2011, it was his group that was named. It was his argument to say you can't argue not to negotiate together. A whole government's designed to find compromise. When I walked with him and sat with him, I said, look, we couldn't negotiate, and there's parameters. Let me be very clear. There's 2 things I will not do. I will not raise taxes, and I will not pass a clean debt ceiling. It just won't pass. So why don't we sit together and find ways to put us on a better path? Why don't we spend less than we spent the year before? If we just go back 7 months to 2022, is that really going to break us to October spending? Then think for a moment. The pandemic is over. You have billions of dollars that was appropriated that was not used, that lay dormant for 2 years. Did you spend it now or bring it back and have savings? If you cap the future spending, but you allow for growth, you make elected officials actually make a decision on what's wasteful and what's not. They'll prioritize the things we find important. And then what about making our country grow again? It's very hard to build something in America, is it not? So in our bill, H.R. 1, we create permitting reform, cutting red tape. So it doesn't matter what form of energy you love. Maybe you just love wind and solar. You still can't build it. What if you want to build the highway or the bridges? You wait on average 7 years. It costs too much. How are we going to compete with other countries? I think if we attach that to a debt ceiling, growing our economy, that's going to save us money in the long run. So let's make it that. I know there's a place we can come to an agreement. It's just hard when people think that there's not $1 that you can cut out of government today. No one believes that.
I swear, I think it's a campaign ad. He's not saying anything wrong. We don't even need this part. Ugh. So it looks like a debt default if the radicals throw the biggest temper tantrum because they didn't get what they wanted. And the repubs can sit there and said they did their part. I hope you're prepared.
If you like it, please share and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
If you'd like to learn more about analysing body language, there is a video course available on Mandy's website for Gold subscribers.